there hasn't come an affliction, a trial, greater from the time of Adam until the end of time, a trial more vicious, more harsha, more deceiving than the fitna of Dajjal.
And the Prophet ﷺ says, all prophets warned their people about him. وَأَنَا آخِرُ الْأَنْبِيَاءِ, and I am the last of the prophets, and you are the last of the nations. So he will come from you, there's no way about it. He will come amidst your time.
One of the biggest tools for fitna that Dajjal the Antichrist uses is money. Dajjal has not only influenced the very first coin that was minted ever, but Dajjal will also influence the last currency that will be used in history. Let us first understand the history of money.
If I asked you the question, what is man's greatest invention? What would your answer be? There's a lot of options. Would it be fire? Because it gives us warmth, protection, and the ability to cook our meals. Or perhaps you would pick the wheel, because it's the driving force behind the beginnings of trade, commerce, and travel. While both of these are excellent choices, most of the time when we think about the greatest inventions of mankind, we tend to forget one of the most important ones of all: money. But unlike man's other great inventions, money is immaterial. Maybe that's why we don't often think of it in the same breath as some of the other great inventions. Things like fire and the wheel are tangible, but not money. Money is merely an idea, an illusion whose value is non-existent, only determined by the importance we place on it. Or at least money as we know it today. However, the fact that money is an illusion does not in any way undermine its importance. Before we created money, we were forced to trade goods and services directly in what we refer to as the barter system, people exchanging goods and services for other goods and services in return. Because there was no arbitrary value placed on these items, every single trade was determined by what each party was willing to give up for something that they wanted. It was kind of like a game. If I wanted some of your vegetables for dinner, but I only reared cattle, I would have to give you one of my animals in exchange for a bag of vegetables. If I wanted shoes to wear, but I only made tents, I would have had to give you an entire tent in exchange for a pair of shoes. And immediately you can already see one of the major problems with this system of trade. It's the asymmetry. As a tent maker, there's no way I wouldn't feel cheated having to exchange an entire living space for simple footwear. Because there was no standardized medium of exchange, it was very difficult to get two people who needed things from each other to come to an agreement. Having to wait until a double coincidence of once where two people need the exact opposite thing at the same time was also very difficult and inefficient. And that wasn't all. You see, our money is not only a medium of exchange, it's also considered a store of value. And before the invention of money, some people could never store their wealth for no fault of their own. Think about the farmer who sells tomatoes and the man who makes tents. The man who makes tents can create an entire village of real estate and barter it out with anyone who needs a place to rest their head all year long, and he would probably cash out on that. But the farmer who sells tomatoes can only barter when tomatoes are in season. And because tomatoes are perishable goods, he cannot keep them for a long period of time. So, although he would be putting in the same effort into his business as the tent maker, there's absolutely no way for him to remain wealthy all year long. There's also the problem of having something that only very few people want. Nowadays, when starting a business, you're often told to find a niche, a small group of people who are very interested in what you have to offer. Before money was a thing, that advice would have you left with nothing worth bartering. The people who had the most were those who owned things that everyone wanted. Things like weapons, animal skin, and salt. But then since everyone knew that everyone wanted these things, they started buying them even if they didn't need them at the time, just so they could trade with them later. And so commodity money became a thing. People would exchange goods and services for the most common items, like salt or weapons, and just use that to trade for what they want from someone else. From salt and weapons to tiny collectibles like shells and beads, humanity had found a better way to trade and transact. Instead of exchanging goods and services for goods and services you may not need at the time, you can exchange your goods and services for arbitrary objects to act as placeholders of value, an IOU, or IOU. After that, you can use these placeholders to get goods and services you actually want from someone else. The idea was brilliant, so brilliant that the entire world slowly moved away from the barter system to the money trading system. But there was still one problem with this medium of exchange. You see, for money to be worth anything, it needs to be scarce. The more available something is, the lesser its implied value. That's basic economics. If everyone can get their hands on something, it can't be worth that much, right? So things like sand or shells that you could easily pick up on any beach weren't really a good measure of value. As a result, around the year 770 BC, the first metal coins were created in China. As a sort of homage, the Chinese made miniature versions of the tools that were once regarded as currency. They made the coins circular so that it was easy to reach into your pocket and take them out without hurting your fingers. Then they cast the coins in bronze. This was it. Money was finally worth something. You couldn't just go to a beach somewhere and pick up bronze. It was scarce. It had value. At this time, money wasn't yet an illusion. The value of a coin was determined by the value of the metal the coin was made out of. If you had a coin that was made from 1 gram of gold, it was worth 1 gram of gold. You could easily measure it and see for yourself that it is, in fact, 1 gram of gold. However, kings and rulers quickly discovered the power of money. They realized that the more of these tiny precious metals you had, the more power you could control. And so in 600 BC, Alyattes, king of Lydia, created the first official money mint. He created the coins using a mix of silver and gold, and stamped an image on the coin to act as denominations. Now people could easily tell the value of the piece of metal they were holding simply by looking at the picture on its face. But the kings of the world wanted more money, and precious metals were too expensive. To produce more money, they started slimming down the coins, then mixing the more expensive metals with cheaper metals. Soon, all the coins in circulation were worth less than what the image on their face said they were worth, and so the illusion of money was born. The value of the coin was no longer determined by the value of the metal. The value of the coin was now simply what the rulers in the bank said it was. So 1 British pound sterling represented 1 pound of sterling silver. However, when international trade became a thing, people realized that metal coins were too heavy to lug around. And so kings around the world started issuing IOU certificates for long-distance trading. Because these pieces of paper were stamped by the king, people trusted its value and believed that they could use it to get back whatever it was worth in coins. And that was true for the time being. As more of these IOU certificates flooded the market, people needed coins less and less. Until finally, the paper was worth what we believed it was worth, even if we no longer exchanged it for physical pieces of gold and silver. From ancient kings to modern-day governments and central banks, money has remained an illusion, a mere representation whose value is determined by the importance people place on it.
The halal currency, or halal medium of trade and transactions, is the gold coin or dinar and the silver coin or dirham. And these are also mentioned in the Quran. Also the gold dinar and the silver dirham were used as currency during the time of every major prophet. So Dajjal will have to make sure that the gold coins dinar and silver coins dirham returns as global currency during his reign, because he will impersonate Prophet Isa, peace be upon him, and will convince the world that he is the much-awaited Messiah. And this is the reason why we are being ripped off for using cash or paper currencies anymore, and are being forced to use the digital payment methods or digital currencies, CBDCs. So that when Israel becomes the ruling state of the world, after the nuclear World War III, the Satanists will have complete control and complete surveillance of money. The digital currencies are also being implemented for an easier and convenient transition to gold and silver coins.
The false Messiah, Dajjal, cannot rule the world from Jerusalem and have Jews accept him as the true Messiah if Israel is using bogus money. No. Israel will have to mint gold and silver coins. And these gold and silver coins will have no graven images. And so now I realize that history is going to end with a return to gold and silver coins as money. Because Israel would have replaced the United States. And the rest of the world following Israel will have to return to gold and silver coins as money. This is coming. I don't know how soon, maybe 20 years or so, but this is coming.